Hi, peeps. Hello, family. I'm back. This is Kimberly Purpose, and welcome to my channel. I want to tell you all that I found another um, interesting article. Um, this is a research study, actually. It's a from a scholarly journal article. I have to read these all the time. I'm doing a paper myself um, for my dissertation on. The identity crisis of African Americans, the AKA Aborigine Americans. But I just wanted, I just scanning through and I came across our article. This is from Dr. Jennifer Hochschild, and she's a professor at Harvard University. And she's a professor of government and African American studies. So I thought it was quite interesting. I wanted to see what the study was about. Now, the title of the story, basically, I didn't get a chance to read the article. Yeah, I'm just gonna be my first time reading it. I'm reading around with y'all. It's a very lengthy publication. It was published back in 2008, and it's very long. So I'm gonna just read the introduction part to give you an overview of what it's about. But it's pretty much talking about the reorganization that took place, the reclassification of people um, within the United States. Now, the title here it says Racial Reorganization in the United States Census 1850 through 1930, Mulattoes, half-breeds, mixed parentage, Hindoos, and the Mexican race. Um, yeah, I found the title quite interesting because most of the people that were reclassified the most and it targeted the most was the blacks. And it was the full-blooded Indians that were reclassified. I just find it interesting that she put more focus on them as opposed to the real people. She's a African American Indian studies professor. I just wonder why it says right here, why did she include Africans in her title? But let's continue. I'm going to read the abstract. This is what the abstract says. Between 1850 and 1930, demographics upheaval in the United States were connected to reorganization of the racial order. Socially and politically recognized boundaries between groups shifted. New groups emerged, others disappeared, and other notions and who belongs in which category changed. All recognized racial groups, blacks, whites, Indians, Asians, Mexicans, and others, were reflected. This article investigated how and why the census racial classification policies changed during this period, only to stabilize abruptly before World War II. In the context of demographics transformation, and political consequences, we find that the census policy in any given year was driven by a combination of scientific, political, and ideological motivations. Based on this analysis, we rethink exactly theoretical approaches to censuses and racial classifications, arguing that a nation's census is deeply implicated in and help to construct in a social and political order. Census provide the concept, taxonomy, and substantive information by which a nation understands its components, part as well as the contours of whole censuses, both created in the image and provide the mirrors of the image for a nation's self-reflection. We conclude by the outline the meaning of this period in American history for current and future debates over race and classification. Okay, now, she pretty much goes on to detail in a nutshell. I know the abstract pretty much gives you, puts everything in a nutshell, exactly what this entire research is all about. Now, I think it's great that she mentions blacks on here, but in her title, I sort of a little baffled that she didn't, being a professor of Black studies, African American studies, she should have put Negro up there too, because that was a name that was oftentimes um, done to given to blacks who were actually Indians was Negro or colored, and she does not have that in her introduction. Interesting. We got a lot of people in these positions who study our history. Um, they scave over the truth a lot. I noticed, that's that gray supremacy I was talking about again. They scave over, and yeah, it affected other races of people very lightly, but it really hurt us the most. And I felt like, given that she's appears to be a Caucasian woman, yeah, there she is. That's a picture of her. That's probably why she scathed over. It's not really her passion. Sometimes I wonder why they even major in African study if they're not going to tell the truth and go into further deep um, detail and be truthful. A lot of times I suspect they're not really passionate about it. The whole point of being in the studies to continue the legacy narrative of covering up and hiding our history and not being truthful. We really do need more Aborigines, more African Americans teaching our own history, But I'm going to read the introduction to you all, but that just bothers me that she didn't include Negro on there and colored, because that's another classification they had. No, I know she got mulatto and half breeds, but you know, I guess she's trying to be inclusive of other people. But I think the people that was most affected was us, especially on the East Coast. So this is what you get when you get a lot of Caucasian teaching our history. We need to have more of our own people teaching it and going into more detail and telling the truth. That's the problem. Truth is not being told. It's being scathed over. But let's continue. I hear she got little quotes here from what people said historically. It says the classification by race or color or individuals or entire population is not only very difficult, but is very delicate matter to the United States government. Wow. Yeah, to cover up and lie about everything. And this is by the Census Director, October 15th, 1936. How come she don't have the name of the person? You know, I see she have it looked like she has the link to it. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm glad she put that in there. Maybe I need to read that. That's an interesting read right there. Hmm. Interesting. Glad she put that in there. And then it says here the Census Bureau should be the greatest statistical laboratory of the United States government, worthy to rank with the best statistical office maintained by European governments. Hmm. Yeah, a great way to cover up and continue the narrative that Caucasians always do to cover up stuff, to cover up our history and make them look like that they on this pedestal. But let's continue. These figures are of little value, and it has here census population volumes on numbers of quadroons and octoroons and mulattoes, 1890. Wow. And I guess this is where she pulled it from. I'm glad they put the link here. I'm gonna put a link to this study to you all, so you all can look at it closer, because this is quite interesting right here. Yeah, let's go on. Let's see what Dr. Jennifer, I'm not gonna say her last name, Dr. Hashal, Dr. Jennifer says. Her name is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name properly. Well, let's continue. It says between the Civil War and World War II, the United States underwent a profound process of racial reorganization. Officially recognized groups categorized, expanded, and contracted. Socially recognized boundaries between groups blurred and shift. Citizens and public actors passionately debate who belongs in which group. Basic components of the racial order were revised, revisited, and fundamentally altered. Such debates were highly consequential. While whites never lost their position at the top of the status hierarchy, we who belong in this privileged group was hotly contested. Whether or not a given group or individual was included to the category of white profoundly affected the group's personal social standings. Blacks and Chinese were placed into ugly contests for the bottom of the status hierarchy with the victory, depending on a great deal of how public officials defined and bounded the group. Simultaneously, whether American Indians were deemed assimilable, whether Mexican Americans should be subject to Jim Crow law, and whether South Asians could be excluded along with Pacific Rim Asians all depend in part on whether they were classified in terms that allows them to potential insiders that affects them to critically outside the status of America. Most broadly, over the course of almost a century, the U.S. government groped its way through extensive experimentation, reorganization, and reimaging of the racial order, with responding impact on individuals and groups' lives. Okay, well, I guess in this article, mm-mm-mm. She scathed over a lot about the Black history. That's why I'm going. Why did she major in Black history? She gonna focus on other groups. It make no sense to me. But I see here, she I want to mention too when they started this reclassification. I'm go back up here to the date. She's saying 1815. See, all this stuff happened right when they did the slavery, and they stopped slavery. That's when all this crazy talk got into place. And the bottom line is they wanted to keep the narrative going with slavery and everything. And this article pretty much, I'm not sure if I'm going to do a part two of this article. Just it's like she scathed over everything. I guess that's why she named it that. And it says here, all branches of government, all levels of the government were involved in greater or lesser degree to the process of racial reorganization. For reasons that she explained in this article, focus on the crucial role of Census Office after 1902. The Census Bureau briefly put us focus on the census because a nation's census is deeply implicated in and helped to construct its social political order. Census provide the concept, taxonomy, and substantive information by a nation, understand the component parts as well as the culture as a whole. A census both creates the image of the pride and provide the mirror image for the nation's self-reflection. Yeah, pretty much. It's just telling you what they want the nation to look like and be perceived. And pretty much they want to continue gray supremacy and have it where white grays are on top and everybody else is on the bottom. And they wanted to strip the African Americans, the Aboriginal Americans, of their rights and heritage. They didn't, their indigenous root. That was the whole point of the reclassification. She mentions the Jim Crow laws, and it really didn't affect Mexicans and all these other people nearly as much. Asian. The people who got the blunt force of Jim Crow laws were us African Americans. The whole point of Jim Crow was to target the Aborigines. Yeah, the Asians were affected and the Mexicans, but the Aborigines pretty much got the blunt force of it. Us getting stripped completely out of our indigenous roots and heritage. But let's continue, and this is what she fails to include in her article. Finding interesting, yeah, African American Studies professor, you don't even mention that. I have to see if this woman even wrote anything about blacks in this. This is the main thing that needs to be discussed. See how they scave over our history? It's a joke. She should be teaching Asian history then, or Mexican history. That's what she needs to be teaching, Latina history. That's what her interest is. Why major in African study if you're not going to get to the truth and the core? That's why I say Caucasians really don't need to be teaching it. Step down and let us teach it. We should be the one teaching our own history because we are going to teach it best. Okay, let's continue. This is ridiculous. Um, I'm not surprised. It's Harvard. Of course they're going to try to help. It's a predominantly gray college, Caucasoid college, so they're going to cover up everything. So anyway, this is very long intro. It says in the United States, social and political order was largely defined by race. Yes, like always. In fact, the process of simultaneously creating and reflecting group classification was so important by 1904. Statistician Walter Willotts could correctly observe that there is no country in which statistical investigation of race questions is so highly developed in the United States. How so highly lied about. How they got the worst statistics. They're really good at covering up stuff, especially in the 1800s. In the past, they didn't do anything great. I think everything has been lied. They destroyed records, taking people's names off just because they don't want to keep slavery going and hide the indigenous roots, heritage roots. It's nothing great. Highly, she should not be teaching African history. She don't even talk about it. Highly developed, it may have been, but the American approach to racial classification was racial classification was so peculiar. Nothing peculiar. It's a blunt, flat out lie, pretty much reflecting peculiarities. That's what I'm saying. What is with them saying peculiar? We don't know what happened. Y'all know exactly what you happened. Don't BS us. You know exactly what you did. Y'all lied and covered up stuff. That's all you did. Okay? Just tell the truth. Really. Let me go on. Of course, experiments in racial classification in any single year and across the decades, racial categorization was intentionally incoherent, inconsistent across the groups, and unstable. Yes, it was unstable. Thank you for at least saying something right. Mixtures between blacks and others was identified, elaborate, and then um, dropped. Asians was racially identified through nationality and finer grain detail. Yeah, here it is. It says mixtures between black were identified, elaborate, and then dropped. Yeah, it was never detailed. They just blatantly took them off as Indian, put them as black. They didn't classify anyone. That's what that was. They put everybody as black. Oh, Latin Americans were variously classified as white, mulatto, or racially distinct. Whites were elaborately distinguished by country of birth, mixed parentage, referred to parents' place of birth, mother's tongue, and only instance of racializing religion immigrants from the Southeast Asian and combined under the Hindu category. Native Americans were alternately ignored and categorized down to a tiny fraction of black and white blood. Yeah, the mixed race and probably the ones that paid the five for the dolls roll and put their names on there. The $5 Indians, the Caucasoids. That's what they did. They took everybody off the list. The real Indians, the blacks. But this is very long. This intro is extremely long. I didn't realize how long it was. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I want to read this whole thing. I'm gonna skip through here. Here it is. It says mysteries. It says here, I'm gonna just go through here. It says mixtures between blacks and other races was identified, elaborate, and dropped. Okay, now let's see. It says here the experimentation abruptly dropped. 1930 census marks the last stage of period of racial reorganization. Wow. They pretty much stripped the blacks of their indigenous rights. That's pretty much what they did. After the years, the Census Bureau perceived only three races: white, Negro, and Indian. See, Negro is actually the Indian. And five Asian nationalities for many decades. It's no longer explicitly identified racial mixture percentage of Mexican race, Hindus, Russians, Indians, or other innovative categories. After 1940, it's no longer used the term color and race. The United States entered World War II with racial order established and the era of racial reorganization complete until it started unraveling again towards the end of the 20th century. So, and then she was just going over and explaining what happened. And what they did was just reclassify people into three groups. And that was it. And that's all they did. And it says here the trajectory raised two empirical questions to be pursued here. Why was the Census Bureau system of racial categorization so inconsistent and unstable? Oh, I know what that is. They want to hide who the Indians were because they don't want to pay that money back. That's what that is. And why did experimentation, reorganization, and racial order began and end when it did? It ended because they got what they wanted. They put all the whites in the category, the blacks in the category, and the Asian in the category. And they erased the Indian group completely out and have hand select all most white people in those Indian groups so they could collect money. And maybe 10% Indians, real half breeds in there, and everybody else don't get anything. And if some whites probably want to get in it, they probably can sneak their butts in there, but everybody else not allowed. That's what happened. But anyway, the church. But anyway. But it's, let's see. The analysis says right broad theoretical questions census do. Why the matter political census relate to the ethno-racial order more generally? When and why do states count their population by race? And why does these classification schemes take particular forms that they do? What impact do classification system have? Wow. I did an article about the classification too on another video. Y'all might want to check it out. I did a classification of the human race and how it stems from slavery. They started doing this classification system during the slave time, and it's all based on slavery, pretty much. And this author don't sort of scaves over the truth on that. I don't see her mentioning anything about slavery, but everybody knows that's what the real reason why they did it. Because they wanted to keep the Black Aborigines, the African Americans, aka Aborigines, enslaved. That's what they want to do. Now, let's continue. It says, our answer to this first empirical question is why this particular pattern of experimentation focused attention on internal dynamics, or rather mystery in agency, mysterious agency. It's not mysterious, it's a fact. They want to oppress certain groups of people. That's the whole point. And keep great supremacy alive. That's bottom line. It's just simple. But anyway, they always want to scave over stuff. Just tell the truth. It says we should be low with interactive by produce officials' choice of categories of classifying a given group in a given year. Constitution between Congress and the bureaucracy over political control, elected and appointed officials committed to scientific integrity, and the pool of ideological beliefs about race on the part of all actors. Sometimes these motivations reinforce each year. Sometimes they are mutually constructive, and sometimes they pull in opposite directions from one another. In conjunction, they generate as well the categories that enable the basic hierarchy of white supremacy. Ah, okay, she did tell the truth. All right, she mentions it. The hierarchy of white supremacy. And that's the basis of it. Thank you, Dr. Jennifer. At least she told the truth. It's in this article right here. The basis of white supremacy is the reason they came up with this dumb system in the first place to ensure gray supremacy is alive. That's exactly what they did. And it says here, non-white subordination to be maintained. Whole point of it. Along with the distinction between actual potential Americans and parental outsiders. But it's also led to great confusion about who non-whites and outsiders were and how they could be defined in relation to other groups and how much they will be subordinated or excluded. Well, that was by design. That everything is by deception and filled with lies. That's the whole point. So that's how they keep great supremacy alive. And then they so crooked and so conniving. The great supremacists they so crooked. They put themselves as being indigenous. Well, they weren't even here. They were the invaders. They the ones that captured came over here and destroyed the country and everything, and brought viruses, killing folks, doing mass genocides, enslaving the indigenous people, and then reclassifying them as black so you can erase the history, and then put yourself as the indigenous one, then call yourself the American, and you are like you the indigenous people. That's exactly what you did. And the chaos is by design to make sure people can't go in and pinpoint who the criminal is. Okay? That's what that's all about. That's by design. That's exactly by design. But see, when we do our research, you got to look past the BS and the foolishness and go straight forward to the tunnel vision objective of what the problem is. Like she said perfectly, white gray supremacy. I don't like saying white because they're I explained that in my other videos. I call them gray because I don't put nobody on a pedestal. Okay? Only Yahweh, the creator, the most high, should be called that. Not no human being. That's why I call them gray. But anyway, let's continue. The gray race. Our answers to the second imperial questions, why this particular period saw such experimentation in creating a racial order, shift our attention from the Census Bureau's internal actions, so its internal context alone. There are many plausible answers. We argue that we boiled down to one: the political and population change. The United States underwent extraordinary transformation demographically, institutionally, and politically between the Civil War and the Great Depression. What happened was they brought in a bunch of gray Caucasoids over here. That's what happened. And they flooded the population. It was a great mass influx of them coming in. They did that so they can ensure that they could have a complete legacy of lies and deceptions, and at the expense of innocent people, the Aborigines, who are outcasts in their own homeland, which is us, the aka African Americans, the prisoners of war. And it says, and we will show how the Census Bureaus, and like all government offices struggle to help keep along to get control of the situation. For a variety of reasons, those changes by 1930, and within the minds the impetus of the change, the census again also sees. And so she was talking about the different changes and transition. Whole point is to keep chaos going and to cover the fact who the real indigenous people are, because they don't want to pay back. The real indigenous people are us. They don't want to pay back. They know they owe us land. They know they owe us money. They know they owe us for slavery and prisoner of war, which is really prisoner of war, because we fought them for a whole 250 years off this land. And then what they did, start kidnapping the women and children and selling them off into slavery. That's exactly what took place here. The same thing they did in Australia. They got the reason why the Great Caucasoids are doing that in Australia is because um, they got the roadmap right here in the United States. It's just exactly what to do here in the Americas, and they just doing the same thing, you know. And then they now they trying to put themselves as being indigenous. Next thing you know, they're gonna call themselves Australians and act like they're indigenous. That's like here. Everybody know Great Caucasoids wasn't here first, and most of those tribes they fairly recognized the 5 tribes, especially the ones that they stripped of the real indigenous people, which is my people, Cherokee and Creek. They took them off the list and put themselves on there and called themselves the Indians. That's exactly what happened. That's straight up identity theft, which is against the law. Let's continue. Making sense of this process of racial reorganization in the United States required theoretical framework above the relationships between the census and the racial order that previous studies have not established. Thus, they first set the stage, for answering the empirical questions by considering more broadly more census help to create and solidify a modern polities racial order. We built an existing literature to generate more systematic claims on the point. We then explored the dynamic shaping of the U.S. Census Bureau's roles in reorganizing the racial order from 1850 through 1930. We will show you how context, the choice interacted in creating classifications of what is now understood in the ethno-racial Pentagon: white, black, Asian, Native American, Hispanics. The term is from, and then they had the list right here, the article. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. But it says here, next, we consider why the period from 1850 through 1930. Of course, slavery. Okay, that's the bottom line, slavery. And then all these wars they had with the Indian wars and stuff, they don't want the truth to come out. And they had to fight these Indians for so long. Of course, they're going to reclassify them, take their nations and put themselves in there and dismantle it by putting themselves in there and they act like that they are the leaders. Yeah, that's all they did. Identity theft. And was especially important for developing the American racial order and why experimentation and racial reorganization ended when it did. It ended because it was no need to. They already did what they did. The damage has already been done. And they used the centuries, almost a whole century. That's enough time to make blacks not realize that they're indigenous here. And then they also, I say this, that the Dawes Roll and all that ended around 1924. They did the damage. That's what it was. And then to ensure that it continues, they did the Jim Crow law on top of that. So, yeah, makes sense to me. So all they did. And then it says here, especially important to developing the American racial order and wide experimentation and racial reorganization when it did. We conclude by moving back out to the broader issue of what racial order was left in place after experimentation ended, what our analysis implies for the contemporary politics of racial classification in the United States, and what remains to be considered in future research. Okay. I'm going to stop here. But this pretty much gives you an overview of what happened and what took place and how they did the census and everything. She even have interesting links to other studies and other research and other historical artifacts as well that you can look at to get more detail and more information on what took place. But I think this was a great article. I'm actually enjoying it. I just sort of wish she would include blacks up here or put Negro. But I guess I don't know what she was doing, but I think that should have been included as well, because we were the ones that were greatly affected by the reorganization. You look at this, you think, oh, only Mexicans. No, I think blacks got the short end and stick out of everybody, and completely. It's to the point where to the they erased our history so bad that people try to laugh at us and make a mockery of the fact that we tell them that we were indigenous here, when the paintings and everything else, all the statues are pointing and showing that we were already here. And all they did was enslave the indigenous people. That's why they scave over everything in the history book and say, oh, they miraculously disappeared. Oh, we don't know what happened. We got too many carcassors telling and writing our narratives. And it's high time that we, as Aborigines, start writing our own narratives, get our education, get educated, smart, know your facts, know how to do investigation through these studies, research, and rewrite. You saw how I did? I rewrite between the lines, all these fancy words, I know exactly what they're talking about. Read between the line and see between the foolishness and the BS, because you can't, you can fluff it all you want to and try to cover up all you want to. Eventually, the BS is going to come, everything is going to come to light. Okay, the truth is going to come out. All right. And so, like I said, interesting work. She did tell the truth on something. At least she mentioned great supremacy as being a problem, the culprit of all of this. And I appreciate her at least acknowledging that to the point. What I don't like is that she making it like everybody else was affected by this reclassification. Blacks took the blunt end of it, and I think she gonna do a study like this. Negro should have been up here at the very front because we were the ones that suffered the most. A lot of people who were classified as black, I would say about 95, all the people that were classified as black are indigenous here. And that's what they try to hide in these studies. And of course, I'm not surprised it's at Harvard, so she don't want to offend her Caucasoid staff and students. So of course they're gonna scave over the truth. Anything that's gonna shed more light on what actually took place, they're not going to do. That's why it's our job as Aborigines to start writing our own research, having our own scholarly journal articles, and have our own debates and discussions on and rewriting history and writing it with the actual facts and no more BS, straight to the point and precise precision. Articles that are written about us and for us and about our issues and our dilemma and what took place in our history books. And that's what we need. We need more artifacts. We need more truth. We need to start digging and getting more answers as to what happened, because you can't keep on BSing us. We too smart and educated right now. And we need to use the power of insight so we can foresee a lot of things that takes place, because we don't do that now. But that's a whole nother ball game. I'll probably do another video on that. I will probably continue on this. The next part is called the Census and Racial Order. I'll probably read into that as well. But please like this video and thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm on blackjunction.com. I'm sorry, blackjunctiontv.com as well. And I also have a link to my PayPal for donations. And I also have a link to, what else? Black Junction, PayPal, and I also have a GoFundMe as well. You can check that out as well. I just started one. And I'm also in the process of doing a Patreon too. So please subscribe to my channel. Subscribe here to YouTube, and also go to my Black Junction TV and subscribe there. It's free. And till next time, peace, family, and be blessed. Bye-bye.